think. Good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome to Screen Junkies Universe. How short are you? That's the topic today. I kid. We have real things to talk about, like the best and worst remakes. Yeah. Movies that are on track to be classics. Dan interviewed Evan Peters, you guys. Quicksilver himself.
Ooh, yes.
Evan Peters.
I like that kid.
Yeah, I like that kid. Like that Evan Peters.
That kid's got a bright future.
He's got a lot going on. Dan Murrell.
Hello.
Billy the Business. He's up here making sure we're on track. Joe Starr with the hair. Rate the hair in the comments below on a scale of 1 to awesome. 1 being awesome and 10 being the most awesome.
Can I pet it?
Thank you so much.
wow.
Let's start this.
That's
This is Fan Friday. So
Yeah.
did you touch it?
I did.
What does it feel like?
The power of God in my hands.
Wait. Do you have? Can we transfer the power? Do we each
Guardians
get a
of the
piece?
Galaxy.
It's your day today, despite what we're doing
have
here.
infinity banks.
Today is the Fans Day. We are doing everything for you every day of the week, but especially on Fridays. So we're going to answer your questions, starting with our topic of the day. James Rigby asks, if you could unreboot, meaning go back in time and stop it being rebooted, or unremake a movie, what movie and why? Billy.
I have always really been disappointed in the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Men 1 and 2.
Spider-Man.
The first one, I just felt like, I was like, all right, this isn't that much different. And the cool thing that they were marketing around that movie was like, you're finally going to get to know what happened to Peter Parker's parents. And they cut almost all of it out, but they left enough in there to make you be like, why is this there? And why are we not following up on this? And then Amazing Spider-Man 2 gives Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin a run for its money in terms of camp and crap. It is bad.
It's rough.
It is not.
I would have rather
not a
seen
good
Spider-Man 4 at that point with Tobey Maguire. I know they stumbled a little bit with 3, but I feel like if it was back to one villain, I believe it was supposed to be Vulture and possibly like Black Cat, Felicia Hardy at that point.
Yeah, it was.
Felicia.
No, it's
what?
Ramon.
Felicity Jones.
Was
right.
Black
She was
Cat,
going to
right?
be Felicia Hardy's, aka Black Cat. I feel like if it seemed like Sam Raimi was like, I don't like these villains in Spider-Man 3, so this movie I don't like. But if he cared about the villains again, I think we could have gotten a pretty decent Spider-Man 4, and I really liked those 1 and 2. So.
Also, I'm pretty sure he had cleaned up and wasn't on all that cocaine anymore.
It's entirely possible. I'm not sure.
Have you guys heard that rumor that that's kind of what happened with Spider-Man 3?
No.
So many drugs. Joe Starr.
Wow.
I've not heard that. Yeah.
You've never heard that?
These are Roth's thoughts. These are not.
No, these are
myself.
These are.
That's Hollywood hot goss.
These are gossips.
Yeah.
So many drugs.
So
did you get scooped?
Is it bad that I just assume everyone in Hollywood is on some drug, be it like Benadryl or heroin?
Because it's true.
Do you have
I would assume
Benadryl? Yeah.
I would assume that they're mostly on drugs, but then it goes to a level of like no longer able to fully function and
no
do
longer
the things.
able to film a Spider-Man
I mean, look,
movie.
Spider-Man 3 was not that bad. It wasn't like a call for help. It was just wasn't it? It was just crowded.
I maintain that the first 45 minutes of Spider-Man 3 are actually pretty good.
The Sandman transformation is awesome.
Yeah, the good stuff with Aunt May, the Sandman stuff is good. They're setting up to something good, and then it just goes.
It goes off the rail.
I don't know. Yeah, apparently. I heard it was studio interference, but let's go with drugs. And my pen's been taken.
Studio 54 interference.
It was drugs. But I would posit, if those Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies were never made, then we probably wouldn't have the MCU Spider-Man, which I think is the best Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So in a strange way, maybe we had,
you
like
had
The Last Jedi was trying
yeah.
to tell us, we had to kill the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In order
Before we could rebirth and
have Tom
remade
Holland.
gloriously.
Sure.
Also,
I
sometimes
guess.
sometimes a little bit of pain makes you appreciate pleasure more. Look. Don't you feel better now that I'm not hitting you?
No, my arm just hurts now for the next couple minutes.
Spider-Man
with
3.
Your titanium.
Don't you feel better that we're
fist.
not hitting you?
You've just been ejected.
That's our
The
pull
op
quote.
never ended.
That's our pull quote for the Blu-ray. Don't
Yeah.
you feel better now that we're not hitting you?
So I was going to at first bring up Point Break, the Point Break remake, because like, one, you can't remake that movie, and two, it's weird that they were somehow unable to remake a campy style action movie in a world where Fast and the Furious also exists. Like, how did you not like hit the tone at all? But also, it came and went, and who cares? It didn't do any damage. So I'm gonna go with X-Men First Class.
What? Hot
Wow.
take, Joe. Hot take.
All right.
Here's why.
Lay it out, Joe.
There's some good stuff in X-Men First Class, but by the end of the movie, they have already failed at the film's mission, which was to reboot, clean up their timeline, give us a clear-cut new direction for the X-Men. Like, they walk it back by the end of the movie. They just make things more complicated. I think that while the 60s setting was cool, like, the 60s setting just makes everything worse if you're going to keep it connected to the other films, which, as we see with Days of Future Past and Apocalypse, with all the decade hopping they continue to do afterwards, like, it's just setting up all these really bad habits that I think just continued to crash the franchise. I love Fassbender. I love McAvoy. I thought that was really cool, but I think it just needed to be a clean, not connected to anything, with Cyclops, Jean Grey, not having to do weird mental hoops that Havoc is like now 20 years older than his older brother, but also we're gonna decade hop 20 years in 3 movies, and he's not gonna look like he's aged 30. It just set up all of these really, really bad habits for those films. There's a lot I wouldn't change about the movie. It's not necessarily entirely a bad movie. There's a lot to really like. There's a lot to really like about it, but I think ultimately it doesn't do what it was supposed to do for the X-Men franchise.
I disagree.
I
think the
It's a
stuff
good
that
movie
came
on its
later
own.
is on them for not being able to
Yeah.
incorporate. I think that
I
X-Men First Class is
I
a
agree
really
with some of the
entertaining
things.
movie.
Like, why would you put Rebecca Romijn in there when she's like, what, you want something like this? Or like the Wolverine things? It's like, I get what you're saying. The reboot was to like, let's just start fresh and new, but it's like, why do you keep tying back to the old ones? I thought that was the whole
Well,
point
it
of
wasn't
this.
really a
Was
reboot,
to not,
though. It was like a prequel more than a reboot.
Right, but they sold it like a reboot, and then when you're watching it, you realize it's actually not. It actually starts literally at the same scene that X-Men 1 starts at. You just keep going further than you did in X-Men 1. Why wouldn't you just?
There's also a lot that I've gone back to, and I'm like, Emma Frost is just awful.
She's terrible in that
Well, I can't argue that.
Nobody can argue
the
that.
the only X-Man of any real interest, because you have like, what's her name, Pixie or Angel or whatever, the girl with wings,
Angel.
which is just a weird Grant Morrison creation that was just sort of like created as a joke. But like the only like really like main solid X-Men character you have gets his powers by hula hooping. Like Havoc's like visual just looks so silly. It was like, there's danger. There's just so many choices that kept me from really enjoying that movie, so I'm going X-Men First Class.
All right. Hot takes.
I disagree
Hot
wholeheartedly.
takes.
I think,
But you're
everything
not wrong,
what they
Dan,
did with
and you're not
Magneto
wrong,
was,
Joe.
amazing.
Opinions.
In
We
that
all have
movie.
them.
Yeah.
Dan, we are still
Dan, sorry I
brothers.
interrupted you. Go ahead.
I mean, it's hard because so many of the remakes are like just kind of innocuous in the sense that like they're annoying, but like Point Break didn't really do anything to the legacy of the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the one that bothers me the most in the sense of just like, because even with Point Break, I can kind of see why somebody might want to do it, just because it's like, well, the surfing and it's 90s and it's a little dated. Robocop was the one for me.
It's Robocop.
Robocop was the one for me that was just like,
It is a travesty. It is an abomination. Dan rant.
well, no, it's just, and it's not even the thing that
You're
sucked.
gonna shoot Toronto for Detroit, and it's like green grass and suburbs everywhere. Oh, it's so scary here. Dan rant.
The thing that sucks was it didn't even have the guts to be horrible.
No.
It was
Yeah.
completely forgettable. It was a complete waste of time. It was a waste of effort. It was a waste of talent. It was a waste of money. It was not needed in the sense, and that's what people, when I say not needed, people like with Solo, and I said it wasn't necessarily like, what do you mean no movie's necessary? It's the dumbest critique I've ever heard. No, I don't think it is. When I say something's unnecessary, I don't mean that movies are a necessity of life and must be created, or else there'll be some vacuum in space-time. I just mean it served no function artistically other than let's slap an established name onto a very generic sci-fi story. So when I say it wasn't needed, I just mean it literally achieved no purpose, nor was it really out to achieve any purpose other than a cynical cash grab to a movie that, as Roth and I have both stated on separate occasions, is perfect. RoboCop is the one that, to me, was just exemplifies, and I think it emboldened people, even though it didn't do well. I think it emboldened people to say, oh, we can remake great movies, and I feel like that it's kind of opened the door to probably two things like Point Break and other things that are just like, oh, if we can just remake great movies now, then let's do these other ones. So RoboCop to me was the one that was just like, one, why? Two, at least do something interesting with it, which they didn't. And the sad thing was there were some interesting bits and pieces to it that if they just put an original IP on it and tried to do something original, there was some prospect of something really inventive and cool that could have been like the next RoboCop. You could have made the next RoboCop, and instead you just decided to slap RoboCop on it and make a completely forgettable, unnecessary. Why?
And I remember being, I think I like worked the red carpet for that or something, and was talking to someone that was closely involved in the production, and I was like, oh, what do you hope for this movie? And he actually said, I hope people will go see the original.
That's not good.
He was involved in the production of the film and said, my hope is that people will see. You know what? It's my hope too, because I recently rewatched it and it absolutely stands up as I knew that it would. It is a perfect movie. It did not need to be touched. It is a masterwork in cinema that people should really, really accept that and watch it. And you'll see that it's true. And it was absolutely so poorly made, boring, complete bastardization of everything that makes RoboCop great. It was soulless. It had no courage.
But they painted his armor black, you guys.
Did they ever explain why all of his body's gone except his hand? He just has like one floating random hand.
And this one, like, he was separated into all different pieces. He wasn't like one unit. Like,
why keep the hand?
The hand is what gives you your
thing.
Humanity, Billy.
Yeah,
that's a great Eastern
for Joe, it's
philosophy.
his hair. We all have a different body part.
Yeah.
That holds the center.
Well, they
of our
had to
soul.
show the face, and when the visor flipped up, it's like, again, it goes. It's the difference between what Verhoeven was trying to do and what Peter Weller was trying to do. It's like the dude went to like mime classes to get the movement right for the thing, and he had no vanity in that movie. Like when you took RoboCop's helmet off, he looked all messed up, and and like his bullet thing, and like. With the RoboCop visor flip, he looked like a movie star. It's like, that's not the point. The point is to talk about the dehumanization of this guy, the fact that he's lost everything, that he's finding his humanity again. That's the perfect circle of that story.
That's why it works, is because he goes all the way from machine and becomes human again. And it's also commenting on consumerism. It's commenting on the culture of the time. It's commenting on Detroit, the militarization of police. It was commenting on real cultural issues. And this one, like, I know it sounds like a dumb detail, but I think it captures just how poorly thought out the movie is that it was cheaper to shoot in Toronto, so they did. First of all, how was that cheaper than actual Detroit? But whatever. And so they did, and they just didn't care that doesn't sell the experience of this is a very rundown, it's a very dangerous community.
And they did the most unforgivable sin of all. They wasted Michael Keaton.
Yeah, how dare you?
Do you know...
You have
Michael Keaton only has so much time as a corporeal being on this earth before he becomes an ethereal being
that is holding to get the world, the universe together alongside David Bowie.
You wasted him.
And you wasted him. You wasted Michael Keaton.
You don't
sure
waste
glad
Keaton,
I got
and you don't waste
multiplicity
Goldblum.
before all that happens.
Well, I will. So since we've I didn't know the RoboCop thing really upsets me, but another one where somebody connected to it. Literally after this movie came out and I had seen it, called me and said, "Are you okay?" was Terminator Genisys. Because I love the Terminator so much. I love Terminator. I don't know if I've mentioned how much I care about Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Oh, great show.
But I do.
So good.
Such a good show. I've mentioned that 200 times and you should still know it. And it was such a waste of that IP. It was such a total effing waste of it. And
Genisys is the app, right?
Yep.
Okay. I'm starting to lose track.
And again, this sounds like a tiny detail, but I think it captures how much they didn't care about the movie they were making, which is Michael Biehn is this like really kind of like he's wiry. He looks like he was raised in this environment.
Yeah.
He looks like
It looks like he was scrapping with the
scrapping
dogs in the
away,
streets,
scrapping
yeah.
in the streets, eating a rat, and like being strong because he had to survive. And then here comes Jai Courtney
The franchise
with some
killer.
perfectly coiffed Joe Starr hair and ripped to shreds. Like
fight
you're
in the streets.
like you're eating a full chicken
What
every
color
3
belt you have
hours
now?
to have a body like that.
Orange.
And that's how much they didn't care. Like you don't live in the apocalypse and get enough nutrition
Yeah.
to have that.
Well, there's a difference
Body.
between as
Now make us laugh because I'm very upset.
No, as wrestling fans, I think we'll say there's a difference between guys that actually look like they could beat you up in a fight and guys that just look strong.
Yeah.
And Jai Courtney is just a guy that looks strong. And the difference between him and Michael Biehn is like I can buy Michael Biehn just punching someone to death.
Yeah.
Like I can't
Just 'cause he
buy
had to.
Like I can't buy like just Jai Courtney just the way he looks on the screen in that movie. I can't buy him like punching someone and it working.
Yeah.
Is there a great Jai Courtney movie or performance?
He was good in Suicide
He,
Squad.
Was
he was
he?
good.
He was.
He
was
was.
good in Spartacus.
That's what everyone always says about him. He was good in
He was good in
the TV
Spartacus.
Spartacus.
Oh yeah, he was okay in that.
I don't know what happened
He
with
looked like
Terminator
a
Genisys because
cherub.
I feel like all the pieces were there. I liked initially the casting of like Emilia Clarke. She looked the part. Arnie's back, but it just was nothing
Awful.
worked. Nothing worked. in that
Arnie was
movie.
the best part of the movie. He really was, which
He
is
was
like
easily the best part of the
easily
movie.
the best
Yeah.
part of the movie.
I feel like
I saw we went to a press screening on that one of the first ones I actually got to go to, and I remember I rarely use the restroom in the middle of a movie, but I was halfway through the movie, I was like, I don't care, it's not recording my pee. And
Not getting a kidney infection for Terminator Genisys.
I ran into Mark Ellis in the restroom. I guess he had the same thoughts, and we both like looked at each other, and he just literally, I just remember like we looked at each other, and we just kind of shared a glance, and he just goes, "How you doing?"
Right?
I was like, he's like, "Yeah, I know."
You know that a reboot or a remake is not well done when the response of people is, "How are you?"
Yeah,
After
like we
you've
literally
seen
had to
it.
do
Are
check-ins.
you
Like,
okay?
"Are you okay?"
Like-
I was like, "I guess we were about halfway through." He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh boy, this is
I
rough."
do feel like we now have a reaction to movies like Robocop and Terminator Genisys coming though with like directors like David Leitch and Tim Miller really starting to step up and say, let's take it a step back. Let's make things a little less CGI. We have these amazing stunt teams. We have these amazing talents, and really kind of moving the action genre in sort of a different, more visceral direction. So I guess if there's any silver lining to just these weird, soulless like remakes, it's that eventually there's an artistic reaction where like someone steps up and they're like, we know how to do action, please let us get in there and take a swing at it.
Yeah. We can.
Hopefully this new Predator, I mean,
Hope so.
we're gonna redo this question in a few months and probably
Exactly.
talk about the new Predator.
I mean, I hate being so negative about it too, because it's like you always want to like a movie, and you also. But the thing that doesn't make sense to me with remakes in general is, to Dan's point, they're constantly remaking movies that are already good. Go find something that could have been great but missed the mark and remake that.
I think there are some cases of that. And it's on this list. I think the George Clooney Ocean's 11 is far more entertaining and interesting than the original. I think the live action Jungle Book just spanks that horrible cartoon.
I have to agree with that.
Yeah, there are remakes that take the basic premise and do it way better. They're just way few and far between.
Sure. I mean, here are some on your list are Casino Royale, which I don't, that's what the reboot of that franchise was great. Batman Begins, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. There are success stories here, but Rise of the Planet of the Apes was also coming off a bad remake.
That's very true. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true.
In Tim Burton's, but I don't know. I mean, you're right. It can work, and it depends absolutely on the execution. But there's certain movies that are so specific to the voice of the director. Like in my opinion, RoboCop, which is like that's where it's really weird. It's like that movie is because that script could have been given to someone else, and it would have been a completely different movie. But it's Verhoeven's voice, and it's his interpretation, and that's why it works.
Or you get like Psycho, and you're like, why did you do this?
Why? Like,
Yeah,
what
what
is the
was
point of that?
What exercise was that? I still don't understand that.
It
I don't
was,
understand any
it
of
was
that.
a filmmaking exercise.
Yeah.
Horribly awry.
But generally speaking, we want to be positive about films and find things that we love. But when you love Terminator 1 and 2 and Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles, like I do, Genisys makes you sad face.
I think Genisys makes you sad face whether you like Terminator or not.
You know, with the successful ones on the list, I think the things they all share in common are they have something to say, or there's a clear mission statement that was in terms of like why.
And they
Someone said, why are we
understand the
doing this?
world.
They answered that question, and that question was written on a whiteboard somewhere every day on set, and they executed that. Whereas I think someone went, you know what the kids like? Robocop. You know, without really, I won't say any understanding. I'm sure that they understood what makes the first movie,
No,
but they didn't care.
obviously didn't.
I think it's a decision that they
I don't
didn't
think they
care.
understood either. I really don't think they understood why people liked the first Robocop.
But that's the point. Is like I think with the two films that we've brought up, they don't understand the world, and that's why I bring up those details, right? Because it's like if you're making that decision that's so clearly like in your mind a bottom line decision, people like Jai Courtney, you think, and people like big beefy handsome Hollywood men, people like it's cheaper to shoot in Toronto, whatever it is, you don't understand, you're not committed to that story, and you're not committed to that world.
Yeah, no.
People forget most studio executives are not creative people in the sense, I don't mean that they're not creative personally. I mean that they didn't go to school for any kind of artistic thing. They're business guys and women, mostly guys, unfortunately.
I don't know.
I think it might be getting better. But most studio executives are not necessarily looking for why a movie succeeded artistically. They look at a spreadsheet and they say, Robocop did well for us 30 years ago, and it seems to be a property, so let's just make it.
There was a cartoon.
And then they
toys.
commission and give notes. Like an artistic person would never look at a movie like Suicide Squad and think it was a good idea to edit two versions of the movie together into one. That's an executive who thinks, oh, this is a great idea to get this movie on track. You know, like that's the thing is why you need people that have some kind of either an affinity for the artist, somebody like Kevin Feige who knows how to talk to artists and can actually communicate with them instead of just through notes and that they force them to do. Or you need executives that have had some kind of a training in a creative field, because I think that's how you get bad remakes all the time, is you get executives that are just kind of looking at a spreadsheet and they don't really care either in the conception or the execution of a movie about the artistic merits of a movie. They only care about like it's like the famous spider story that Kevin Smith talks about with when he was doing the Superman script. You had the executive that he only cared that it's been 20 minutes since there was a fight scene, and the kids like fight scenes, so put a fight scene in the movie. Doesn't matter if it makes sense to the movie or not, and then put a big spider in the end because people like giant spiders. That's what you're. I think
that's a known fact, though.
I just have the sympathy for people that for artists that fight executives, because most of these executives are not. They don't have artistic training or really care about the art of the movie at all.
Yeah.
In many cases. Not in all cases, but in a lot of cases.
So Paul Feig, who was behind Freaks and Geeks, Bridesmaids, and a number of other things, came to talk to my directing class. And he gave one of the piece of advice that I most remember, which was basically, we asked like, oh, how do you deal with like executives, whether it be network executives or studio executives? And he was like, so this is what you do. They give you 10 notes that don't make sense. You find the one that you can kind of work with, and you implement that note in whatever way that you do. And then you go back hard at them and go, oh God, thank God. That note saved everything. If we hadn't done that, then this and this and this wouldn't have happened. And thank you. That was so smart. And you go so hard into that note and how great it was that they feel like they've contributed, that their job is saved, which is what most people are afraid of in Hollywood. It's a town run on fear that you're going to be fired any second because you made the wrong decision, which is why people are afraid to make any decision half the time. And you go in so hard about how brilliant that was that they forget about the 9 things you did not do. So there you have it. You can deal with your partner that way too. We have some fan questions. I'm kidding, honey. A lot of these are kind of like like what's the worst thing today, but that's okay. Umair asks, what is the most confusing, challenging movie you have ever sat through?
Ooh, confusing. Oh man.
Mulholland Drive.
Yeah, that's a tough
for
one.
me. Was I haven't revisited it in a while, but the first one, I might have seen it twice. It's I don't know. I'm not a David Lynch guy, so sitting
not
through
either.
that, I'm just like, I don't know. It's been a long time. Maybe I should revisit it. But I just remember sitting through it. I was like, I don't know what this is. I really don't.
I
I'm
got
not
very
making a
frustrated
judgment,
throughout
but-
Mulholland Drive. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like on paper I'm supposed to be a David Lynch guy. Like
Yeah.
when everyone first was like, "You haven't seen Twin Peaks?" I was like, "No." I was like, "Oh my God, you are gonna love Twin
Yeah.
Peaks." And I did not love Twin Peaks. Yeah, I don't know why I disconnect to his stuff so much.
The bylaws of film criticism say that if I want to take myself seriously as a film critic, I have to
Oh,
acknowledge
that's not
Mulholland
true.
Drive as one of the masterpieces of the early 21st century. But I just
I don't think
get it.
that's true. I actually do love David Lynch, and I love Twin Peaks. I don't love everything that he does.
Yeah.
I more love, like, I legitimately love Twin Peaks as a show, but with David Lynch, I just kind of love David Lynch. You know what I mean? More. It's weird. I like him as a filmmaker, like as a being, even more than I just love his movies, because he legitimately just does what he wants, makes the movies he wants to make, and really doesn't care, seemingly, how people respond to it. And I feel like I care so much about all of those things all the time.
Sure. Yeah,
that
yeah.
it's like that just seems so liberated.
Another one I want to revisit, because this was a long time ago, but it popped into my head, was I think when I saw The Thin Red Line, I was expecting to watch also Saving Private Ryan. And it was not that. And the whole thing was very frustrating and sort of challenging for me to watch. And I was very confused and not ready to sit down and watch a real thoughtful deep dive into the psyche of an American military man, when in my head all I really kind of wanted was the opening from Saving Private Ryan again, but maybe in a
Different
on
spot.
an
Very
island,
different movie.
you know. So that's when I feel like I owe a sit down to revisit that I've never done, that I've never gone back to.
What about you, Billy?
I would say either Funny Games, which was not confusing, but it was very challenging, and I get what they were trying to do and make me feel, but I was just I did not like being challenged in that way during that movie. And then I'd also say the same for Elephant, where to this day, I still don't know, after I watched it, I was like, why does this need to exist in the world? This didn't tell me anything. It didn't really take me inside the head of anybody. It just showed me something that unfortunately happens way too often. And I don't know. I feel weird about that movie. It's really well done and it's chillingly accurate, but it's just why does this exist?
I think it's he's with that movie Elephant. I love Elephant.
Yeah,
and I feel like one of the things that he's, because Gus Van Sant is another filmmaker where he's just gonna experiment with an idea. I feel like it's and I hate to use this phrase, but it's the banality of the murder.
Mundane.
Which,
It's
and
the
I
mundane
get that, and it just
quality.
I don't know. Maybe that's the whole point, is to feel the way I feel at the end, where I'm just why is this? Why? You know? And I guess that is why it's challenging to me, because it's not something that I walked away with a better understanding, or walked away critically thinking about
it's
someone's
a movie that
motives.
makes
It's just
you feel.
that sucks. Not the movie, just this. If you haven't seen Elephant, I do recommend watching it, even though I feel that way. It's a tough watch, but
It is, but I think Elephant's also a movie that's more about eliciting a feeling than necessarily the point is that he's not presenting a point of view about it. He's not telling you how to feel or think about it. He's not telling you what the kids were thinking, because he doesn't know, and neither do we. But he's presenting the idea of how mundane this violence is and has become, and because he's showing just a very mundane school day, and this is how it ends. I think Elephant's great.
I'm a fan.
Yeah.
But I'm hit or miss on Van Sant sometimes. So
Yeah.
he does that a lot. He's pulled that trick out of the bag several times. And he did the aforementioned Psycho.
Yeah.
So
So
is
you
true.
mentioned the Terrence Malick movie, A Thin Red Line. This movie is not challenging and it is not confusing, but it makes me mad. And the movie is called Knight of Cups. I hate this film. I really hate it because I loved Terrence Malick, and then he almost like folded in on himself and became like a weird parody of Terrence Malick with this movie. It is so pretentious. It is so pointlessly obnoxious. The movie, let me just tell you how this, okay. Oh, I know what it is. You know those terrible perfume commercials in which like Natalie Portman runs up on a beach for no reason in black and white and goes, "How much do you love me? Prove it!" And it's like, that's perfume for some reason. It's like, that's what this movie is. Those
For 2
commercials
hours.
make me insane, and that's what this movie is for 2 hours. It ends with Christian Bale looking at the camera. I don't know if he's looking at the camera on a beach going, "Bacon." That's how it ends. Yes.
I felt that. See, I didn't even get that far because I felt that way about Tree of Life. I watched Tree of Life and was like, wow, this movie thinks it is way deeper than it is. And I didn't hate it. Like some people are like, I hated the Tree of Life. Like I didn't hate it. I just felt like, like you said, it's like Terrence Malick has just gone up his own butthole at this point. And,
He's crawled way up in there.
Way up in there, Woody. And that sucks because like he made Days of Heaven, which is one of my favorite, the best movies ever. He made Badlands. Yeah, he's made so many great movies, but yeah, I feel like he's just kind of bought into the pipe of being Terrence Malick and is making Terrence
Malick
movies.
movies.
At this point.
I didn't hate Tree of Life, but I was like on the verge with it, and then when I watched Knight of Cups, I just was like, Kayla, my partner, who will bring it up, just knowing that it will. Every once in a while, like every time one of those perfume commercials comes on, he's just like, "Bacon."
I didn't watch it because you came in so angry. Because I was
Does it
going
make
to.
you curious?
Not when you get, there's a level of your like frustration where I know it's like, well, I probably will like that.
This won't be a fun hate.
Yeah.
This will be an anxiety or a stress hate.
Like, my biggest fear is that I watch him like, that was great. Because then I feel like I'm just going to awaken the beast.
Oh yeah, not a lot of movies actually make me angry, but we've managed to touch on a few just today.
Awesome.
Garrett, I'm going to skip around a little bit. Get Out Mecca wants to know, with certain actors and actresses having box office flops, do you think that the box office poison is a real thing in that regard? Why or why not? I do not.
If like certain actors tank something.
Yeah.
No, I think we've moved into less of a star-driven era and more of a franchise and IP-driven era. I don't think Chris Pratt can open a movie on the name Chris Pratt. I think Guardians of the Galaxy can open a movie. I think Dinosaurs can open a movie. But I think with stuff like Magnificent Seven, we've definitely seen that like there's a limit, there. No one's going no one's coming out in droves the way they used to, for Arnold or for Tom Cruise. The way it was back in my day when my parents would take me to the multiplex. So yeah, I think it's more IP property and name driven now.
I agree, because even The Rock can sometimes be hit or miss depending on the project itself. I think Rampage didn't set the world on fire, but it was coming off the heels of Jumanji, which was already an established IP that a lot of people in my generation really liked, and it just so happened to be a fun movie that did have some other star power to it. It had Jack Black and Karen Gillan was coming off, Guardians and everything. So yeah, I kind of think it is. I think like Johnny Depp is tainted goods now, man. I think you put Johnny Depp in your poster, it doesn't matter what the movie is. People aren't going. I don't think box office poison.
We'll see how much Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, but it's also not like he's not like Jack Sparrow on the cover.
No,
of
but
the
he's
poster.
one of the cooler characters. It is a bummer because he really is playing one of the more potentially interesting.
But what's the
characters in
last
that
Johnny
world.
Depp movie that was like a hit?
But
You have to go back a little bit.
And I think with Depp, I think there's a combination there of having some rough box office return and also everyone being like, oh, you're a dick. I don't know if I want to support that with my wallet.
Yeah.
I think if Johnny Depp was just a perfectly normal stand-up dude that just happened to have a body held together completely by scarves, but was otherwise fine, I think someone would just be spinning into, well, he just flopped 19 Pirates of the Caribbean movies in a row. But are you guys ready for the grand return of Johnny Depp in New Fast and the Furious? You know, there's Hollywood's never gonna give up on
Now I'm sad that can never be.
on New Fast. It's spelled with an NU.
They put him out front on Murder on the Orient Express, though, and
They
that
did,
movie did
yeah.
pretty well. So,
What do you think?
I think that you're only as good as your latest hit. I think that Robert Downey Jr. at one point was box office poison until he wasn't, and then he was America's favorite star again. I do think that you do have a limited runway, though. We always bring up the poor Taylor Kitsch, but it's true. He got 2 or 3 shots at a franchise, and I don't think it was really his fault that they didn't launch. He didn't even really pick the wrong projects. It's just that they all turned out shitty. He picked what should have been the right projects for his career. Having said that, now I think it's almost like a comeback story. So I don't think it's permanent. I think if Taylor Kitsch were to get a good role in something, he could become a big star. Movie-wise, he's done some great stuff on TV. I think he's a really good actor. So I think that you do get labeled unreliable at a certain point, and you kind of have to go dormant. But that's not to say that there's no coming back from that, because people forget, like, when Mission Impossible 3 came out, Tom Cruise was box office poison. His personal life was too complicated. You couldn't rely on him. And then now he'd
never had sex with a woman.
Yeah.
He'd never known what that was about.
And now he's Tom Cruise again. So it's all about what you've done lately. What have you done for me lately? And I think it's always been like that. Katharine Hepburn was box office poison until she wasn't. Like, it's. I think people just like a narrative.
An interesting one to me was the 3 Twilight kids. Sorry, I know we're going long. But Werewolf Kid was projected into stardom based purely on Twilight, kid from Twilight, and now he's going bigger and up. It did not work, and I think Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson were smart enough to kind of go, we're going to take a step back, and our narrative is going to become those kids from Twilight can actually do a lot, and like, check out this. Isn't it cool that they like snuck out of Twilight and just started making really good stuff instead of a more artificial feeling like, you thought Twilight was a juggernaut? Wait till you see Taylor and bounce off.
What was it?
That weird one with Susan Sarandon or something?
We could never remember.
It was like
had
something about
Ripley
a
in it.
kidnapping.
Yeah.
Or like it was.
But you know, like
abduction.
Abduction.
I think sometimes those artificial studio moves to sort of like, this is the next guy or this is the next gal, like they just don't work. So I just think that's an interesting 2 sides of the coin, is the 3 kids from Twilight.
Well, and they're very different human beings, and like Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson clearly want to be actors and they want to do interesting work, and now they have enough money that they can, and they can just make these small movies and still be really rich, because she does a very annoying perfume ad that I'm sure pays her well, but it's okay because you take that money and you make interesting films. So I will.
What will happen when you actually find out that those are all Knights of Cups canon?
They're
all connected.
They're all connected.
Like, those are Knight of Cups Marvel one-shots.
It would make perfect sense. It would only make sense. So we are running a
It
little
does make
long.
sense, Roth. It does make sense. Because perfume.
Because perfume.
Obsession.
God. I hate them. But we are running a little long today, and we want to leave on a very positive note. You have something very fun to watch this weekend, and it could have been worse with Mr. Joe Starr on Solo. Those are always really fun. I'm looking forward to it. There might be toast involved. But before that, you have an amazing interview with Mr. Dan Murrell for American Animals. Do you want to set that up?
That's right. Yeah, American Animals hits theaters. It starts in limited release this weekend. It's one of those movies that's going to expand wide. It's a movie that I enjoyed a lot. I think we might be doing a roundup maybe next week where we can go into a little bit more. But we got to have the director, Bart Layton, writer-director, and then, as you mentioned, Evan Peters, who's in the movie, and Blake Jenner, who's in the movie, who has been in Everybody Wants Some. He was in The Edge of 17. Kind of an ensemble cast. They came in last week to do an interview for the movie. We got to talk about some cool stuff, and I just think it's just a fun. I like movies like this. This is a very unconventional movie. We got to talk a little bit about the process of making it, how they approached playing real people in the movie that has the real people in it also. It's some cool stuff. So
Take a
check
look.
it out. Hey everybody, so happy to be joined today by the writer-director of American Animals, Bart Layton, and two of the stars, Evan Peters and Blake Jenner. Guys, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
The movie opens on June 1st. People can start going out in the theaters and checking that out. Very briefly, just to kind of catch people up, if they haven't seen the trailers, this is a story of a group of friends who decide to attempt a heist that may or may not go exactly as it was planned. And the first thing I wanted to ask about, and it's kind of for all three of you, is this movie does something a little different than you see in a lot of movies that are based on a true story, or as this movie says at the very beginning, is a true story, in that you're not just telling the story of real people, but you're incorporating them into the storytelling. So how do you, when you're approaching it, how do you approach it from the fact that, like, you're not just basing this on what other people did, but like they will actually kind of be participants in this? Does that change the way that you approach writing and directing it, or acting in these parts?
There are we all see movies that say based on a true story, and then you kind of have that sneaking suspicion that there's a whole lot of artistic license that's been taken. There was something about this story which was so much stranger than fiction and didn't require a whole lot of additional kind of exaggeration.
Evan, Blake, when you're approaching playing these, usually playing a real person can't be easy, but then knowing that they're going to directly be, a lot intercut with you, is there a part of you that just has to kind of say, I have to do my thing, and, trust that in the vision of making the film that it'll cut together? Or are you kind of keeping an eye on, I want to make it so that when you're cutting between these two, my character and the real person, that it kind of blends together?
Well, initially that was my instinct, was to talk with Warren as much as possible and talk like him and act like him and move like him and et cetera, et cetera. But then Bart smartly was saying that our version of the story is sort of the movie fantasy version of the story, and so we have sort of this artistic license where we can sort of do our own version of the character, and that works well, juxtaposition to the real guys. I mean, we could have done some sort of impersonation of them, but next to them it would have been silly and kind of goofy. So doing it our own way, I think really was the right move.
These characters look to movies to sort of be their inspiration for how to do this, because like there's no how-to guide, so we're going to take all these cues from these different things. Is that something that, again, like it's kind of like this meta thing, like you're in a movie about these guys who did a heist that partly based their stuff based on movies. Did you do a lot of background research on that kind of stuff yourself? As in, like, how has this been done in movies before? How do I want to differentiate? Or is it sort of like, this is our own project and we want to kind of do our own thing with it?
I watched a lot of the Ocean's movies, Ocean's 11, 12, 13. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which isn't a heist movie, but a similar sort of rebel rouser type thing.
There were certain things in that character that I felt was similar to Warren, to Evan's character. And Dog Day Afternoon we watched.
Dog Day Afternoon. What was the other one? The Sting.
Yeah.
The Sting.
For me, it was kind of just like with my character, I feel like, he's got this athletic kind of view on this, like score the touchdown, get the job done. There's got to be some superstition with an athletic mentality. I have two older brothers that were athletes growing up, and they wouldn't like wash their underwear. They used the same cup or jersey, all the time, and they would think that was also like part of the reason why they would be the victors at the end of the night, because everything was working in their favor. So that was kind of what I'd focus on and try and just get into that mentality.
You focused on not washing your underwear.
Isn't that?
I was the dirtiest dude on set when we were shooting this movie. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious because
I showered. I did shower just fine.
I was kind of looking back at some of the other movies that you've done, and going back to like Everybody Wants Some and Edge of 17. Like a lot of those have to do kind of as this movie does about a group and the kind of the group dynamic and your character finding his place in that group. Like, are those stories that you're drawn to as far as like I like playing kind of a piece of these puzzles?
Yeah, I really dig it, and I come from a family like of four boys, and I was the youngest, so it's like trying to find yourself within like three dudes that kind of set the tone for what the jet stream that you were gonna follow can be kind of confusing.
Yeah.
You want to be an artist and, you know, one person's head is in the clouds and two of them are playing football, you know, and your dad grew up being an athlete. I kind of dig those kind of stories, trying to find your niche, whether it's like a search for identity within a wild circumstance like this one, or one of the movies you said, like, you know, everybody wants them, meeting a huge group of alpha males and trying to figure out what's real and what's not and how much is fake, and find out who you are within this group. I just kind of dig that, like those coming of age stories that can go anywhere, really, and you're just on the search for identity in
Right.
different ways. That's really interesting to me.
Evan, kind of looking back at what you've done, I mean, it's kind of like runs the gamut from like the huge summer blockbusters, cable TV, network TV. When you're looking for, you know, what you kind of want to add to that mix, is it story, is it character, is it a combination of both? As far as like, you know, this is where I want to go next.
Yeah, I think it's both of those. I think what drew me to this was that it was a true story, and when I read the script, Bart had filmed a documentary beforehand and wrote out the excerpts that you see actually in the film, and so it worked beautifully. I was like, how are you going to get the guys to say this? But they had already said it, and it was such it made it so much more real and had so much more gravity to it, and it made it that much more intense, and it made it that much more sad.
Well, as we mentioned, American Animals comes out June 1st. If you're, pitching for people to see it, what kind of journey would you want to get across? Like, this movie is going to take you on, as an audience member, and just as, this is a story that I was not familiar with at all, and I was kind of just enthralled by like what's going to happen next with the story of it,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think, like I said before, I think, there are a lot of movies you watch, and there are some movies you participate in. And, if the audiences that we've had are anything to go by, at Sundance, at South by, whatever, it is a very big roller coaster, that people come out feeling like they've been through a hell of a journey, and it's visceral. You're going to know what it feels like to attempt to perpetrate something like this. I don't think, and I think it also hints at other ideas which I hope people will take away and think about.
Well said, Bart.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, American Animals hits theaters on June 1st. Seek it out. As it's a really interesting, compelling, edge of your seat kind of movie. I highly recommend it. Bart Layton, Evan Peters, Blake Jenner, thank you so much for coming in
Pleasure,
today.
man.
Thank you.
And thank you for
us.
watching.
Yeah, thanks.